He's an author with a book coming out, and it's a story you don't want to miss.
What better memorial tribute to our veterans of the Korean War than by author Todd Wood joining us and discussing his new book, Lost Bastards. Now, why the title Lost Bastards?
Well, the family contacted me to write this story, and it's actually never been told. It was a secret for about 50 years, but there was about almost 30 Americans that were inserted into the Korean peninsula during the war, right toward the end of the war, which is now the DMZ. And they were there to test battlefield radar, which had never been done before. It was actually the precursor to the NSA that sent them there. And the problem was the U.S. Army didn't know about them, really. So when the 2,000 Chinese overran their position, they were there by themselves. So they called themselves the Lost Bastards. They were there with about 100 Korean troops, South Korean troops. But that's where the name came from.
That's so interesting, because I mean, this is a war that's pretty much forgotten by most people. They usually remember the Vietnam and World War II, but this is the war that was literally in between them.
Yeah, hence the name for the Forgotten War. You're exactly right. Most people don't know a lot about it. It was a very brutal war. 50,000 Americans died along with other UN troops.
We always called it the Korean conflict, too.
Right,
it was
sure.
only more recent that we started calling it a war, that we were even allowing our veterans to be benefited from being in that
And there's
conflict.
also never been a treaty signed.
Yeah.
There's still technically at war. So it's still, I was over there last March on the DMZ, and it's still a very scary place.
Yeah.
So these fellows were really abandoned.
Exactly. They weren't so much abandoned as the Army just didn't know they were there. So when they finally found out, they sent some troops to come help them out. But and they didn't want this technology overtaken, because it really wasn't made public that we had this for 10 more years. So, until almost the 60s in the Vietnam War. So
you can only imagine their fear if it had gotten in the wrong hands.
Exactly. That's why they told them don't surrender. So here you have, 14 out of the 28 died, protecting the technology and protecting the hill. It's a fascinating story.
It really is. So your story is actually a little fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about your background, because you have a military background in Special Forces.
I went to the Air Force Academy. I then flew Special Operations helicopters. I flew SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force around for a few years and kind of counterterrorism stuff. And then that's a young man's game, though. I left in 1994 and went to Wall Street for about 20 years and then left, and now I've written books for the last 5.
So that led to your trilogy then, because you've authored several books.
Yes.
And I think the first one was Cash, and then Sugar.
Well, it's called Currency, and I wrote it on the commuting into the Wall Street. So on the train, an hour and a half each way from Connecticut.
So a lot of your own personal reflections in there.
Yes, definitely.
And so how did the family come to find you then? Was it through your other books?
I have a huge social media presence, because that's the way I've kind of marketed my books and columns and stuff. And they just contacted me and said, we have this story, we actually have a screenplay, would you like to read it? And I said, sure. And then the more I looked at it, the more interested I became.
Interesting.
It's interesting that you wrote about this group that pretty much was at the ground zero of the 38th parallel.
Yes.
And it's funny that North Korea is such a strong presence in terms of enemy for us today. Did that have an impact on your writing this story? Or
obviously I wanted to just honor these guys, because if you read the book, what they went through for 2 or 3 weeks is just horrific. So I wanted to do that and honor the family. But to talk a little bit about the Korean War, which Americans unfortunately don't know a lot about history, and I think this is one area they really don't know much about. So anything I can do to help correct
scores
that
haven't been settled. It's still a pretty tense area to be in.
It is. When I was there in March, I'm sitting in, there's a building actually sitting on the line of the DMZ where they go in there, Panmunjom I think is where it's and you go inside and you can step into North Korea, and that's where they do the negotiations.
Right.
And as I was in there with the American officers, the North Koreans actually came to the windows with cameras and were taking pictures of all of us through the windows while we're sitting there talking. So it was quite fascinating. Yeah, very weird, definitely.
So tell us, how would we get a hold of your book?
My website is ltoddwood.com, nice and easy and simple, and all my books are there. You can get this as a signed copy, or it's available on Kindle and ebooks, and the audio will be coming out soon too.
Okay, and I hear there may be some there's stories of a possible movie.
Yes, I'm on my way to meet a producer in a couple hours.
Fantastic.
Here in LA. So.
Good luck to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
To hearing and watching your story.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
And up next, he has a great acting career, and you may have seen him in some projects.
He's also a musician, and today the multi-talented Alan Wassman joins us to discuss his latest work. Coming up next.